So we're in the middle of the redwoods.
Yes.
And we're here for what we're calling Camp Redwood.
Yes.
An idea that you had about a year ago to bring nonprofit leaders together, or social impact leaders, I should say, together. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Camp Redwood is?
Yeah, it's our first event or gathering of different founders, CEOs, and executives of social impact organizations that all have really important missions. And the idea was to bring us together in a place, in a setting like this in the Redwoods, to talk about both big ideas and big challenges, and to really have a space to zoom out and think long term. And that's been so much of the messaging here is how do we create an environment that, the tagline is we're inside nature, but we're outside the box. And it's a space where people can really think and imagine ways to do their work even better, and then be surrounded by other peers that they can relate with, because we're all thinking in a similar way for our mission. And so we wanted to bring in speakers that can contribute to that. We wanted to also really focus on innovation and what that really means practically, and be able to have a setting where we can all dialogue and discuss what that means, and also what are actions that we can now take this year that will lead us towards the long-term thinking that we've talked about. And so, that's what it's been about. And started off by just inviting a lot of people that I've got to know in building News Story during my social entrepreneurial journey. And that was a lot of the group that was here.
Amazing. When you were thinking about this, maybe the first time you and I talked about it was like maybe a year ago, and you were thinking, and like at that moment we were thinking, I hope we can achieve X.
Yeah.
What do you think was achieved from this last few days, bringing together some amazing speakers, amazing leaders? Did it achieve what you were hoping it to achieve?
Yeah, I really think it did. The main things that come to my mind is that I feel people are walking away with a few really big ideas and actions that they can start taking in this year, which is 2024, but the results are going to happen more in the future.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the thinking at Camp Redwood has been, how do we encourage people and as leaders together to think more long term, and to have a bigger picture perspective, and to really zoom out of our important operational roles in the quarter or even in the year, and think even beyond the year about what could be, better and have more of an outsized impact with our models, with our strategies. And that's where a lot of the thinking started here. And then, we can take our own actions this year. But that was a lot of the hope, was the long-term thinking.
Yeah, awesome. And I think there's like a lot of really powerful themes that kind of emerged just through, whether it was like ideas that were ignited through some of the just amazing speakers on stage, or just in the conversations that were happening just organically at the fire pit and at the kitchen table, and all the hike. I mean, just being in a magical place like where we're at just lends to a lot of creativity.
Totally.
And just a lot of free thinking and conversation. One of the things that I think was a theme that challenged the way I think about certain things is the concept of scale. A lot of times when we like think of scale, we're thinking of like revenue growth, right? Which
Totally.
that will always be a factor of scale.
Yeah.
But it's not what drives scale.
Right.
It's the big idea and vision of how do we achieve the ultimate impact. And I feel like that was just communicated in so many different ways throughout the conference. And I appreciated that message really throughout the week.
And the revenue follows that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, how do you, if you have maybe an evolved idea or a way to reach more of your missions, who you're trying to reach, then you can design the revenue model to follow that.
Absolutely.
And when it's done on Funraise, it's even more efficient.
Nice little plug. The other thing too that I think makes Camp Redwood so unique than versus anything I've been to.
Yeah.
Is the individuals that was sharing their experiences, from stage. They weren't all nonprofit like leaders. And I think sometimes we can get into this echo chamber as nonprofit leaders, and we don't think that there's a lot we can borrow outside of that. But man, it was just like, it couldn't have been more relevant. Like the topics that were being shared, even though a lot of the speakers were not, nonprofit like leaders, they were founders,
right,
entrepreneurs. And I really like that reframing, whether it was intentional or not, of nonprofit executives and leaders to consider themselves founders, entrepreneurs,
100%.
Going after some of the biggest problems.
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole purpose. And, whenever I've described myself or our team, I never put nonprofit in front of it. Or when I'm talking about others in the space, I just say they're entrepreneurs and they're executives that are trying to go after, really important, big challenges. And I think that type of founder mentality and those frameworks apply to for-profit and nonprofit.
Yeah.
And I think that it's awesome to just have it come together and not have to be like, oh, well, what about this? There are differences, obviously, and I think people are smart enough to filter out what are the differences.
Yeah.
But concepts like we talked about here, we started with around communication, right? And we had phenomenal media executives and someone from Y Combinator talked to us about the power of clarity in communication and in storytelling, and they were using case studies that weren't from the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, Teen Vogue.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, we've had a former NFL athlete that now has gotten into investing, and he has his own investing firm that's grown and evolved, and, talking about team building with him and concepts as a leader.
Yeah.
Right? A leader is a leader. It doesn't matter if they're, a nonprofit exec, a for-profit exec, an NFL player. And so a lot of that is so applicable to everybody that was here.
Absolutely.
And then the last one, which was incredible this morning, was a gentleman that gave us the best lessons on innovation and first principles thinking in a way that we could all take and apply to our missions.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a powerful last session. So practical, just so many wise words from that. One of the things too, I felt like was another theme here was just like a deep sense of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I'm curious from your perspective how like intentional that was, because a lot of the speakers talked about like their failures.
Yep.
And there was, I don't know if like over the last 24 months, just kind of your guys' transition to where News Story is at, if that was like intentional or if that was just something that organically happened. Like you often don't hear people talking from stage about failure and where that takes them. But there was just that, I feel like that really set the tone for just the whole last couple of days as people connected, offline and so forth. So was that intentional, or was that just kind of a product of just bringing great people together? It
was intentional. And I'd say that, first thing was, I think I live in New York City now, but I used to live out in Silicon Valley, and News Story got a lot of our start and our DNA being out here, kind of where we are now in California. And I think there's just a culture here that is more open to, of course, risk taking, and knowing that if you're going after something that is challenging but is worthwhile and meaningful, there is definitely a chance it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you shouldn't go after it. And even if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have tried or you shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And so I was intentional about having, I won't say their names right now, but 2 phenomenal social impact founders that I would probably put up there in the top 1% if you just had to say by capability. And they both told stories about things not working.
Yeah.
And a company or a startup ending in a way that was not the vision, but they had the courage to go after something, try it, and there was, a purpose in all of that. So that was, I think, one is just kind of being out here and more of that culture. And then the other thing is making it feel real and
Yeah.
authentic to other founders that if we're going after a big vision, it's gonna be a long-term journey.
Yep.
And along that journey, there are gonna be times when you're absolutely crushing it, and that's gonna feel great. And there's also gonna be times that are really freaking hard and are challenging, and you're messing up, you're missing numbers. And then obviously there's a lot, mostly probably is in the middle of that,
Yeah.
right? Absolutely crushing it and challenging. But I wanted to be real about some of my journey, my story, and how we've had a lot of challenges over a 2-year period, missed numbers, all these things. But ideally, it's all in service of the bigger vision and the long term. And that was what we're trying to communicate together.
Yeah. Because I think there's like this like perception for people looking on the outside, and I'm talking specifically about organizations that like look to News Story or other kind of iconic brands in the social impact space as they're always up and to the right, and it creates this like pressure that, man, if they're always up to the right and we're not up to the right, what are we doing wrong, right? But the reality is, no, there are going to be these dips, or there are going to be these challenges that is just for every organization is going to face, regardless of how amazing it looks from the outside. And I think that vulnerability, I heard it from so many different people talking how that was like so beneficial and refreshing to hear that we're not alone in the challenges. And one of the speakers yesterday said, he's like, if success is like up here, there's no, I think the phrase he uses, like, there's no escalator or elevator to it that gets you up there faster. You just have to grind it out, and you're going to have to put in the work and work your ass off. You have to work as hard as you possibly can if you want to achieve, whatever your vision might be. Mm-hmm. And I think that like that message of grit, and you're going to fail, but if you get back up and you keep trying, eventually you're going to come out with a win. And I think that was a really nice, succinct message kind of throughout the last couple of days.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing I'd add to that as well, when we think about making, which is what we try to talk about a lot here, of these, like, you're going to have these bigger decision points, right? And the gravitational pull is going to be to do the easier decision, right? That means maybe less shakeup, less fear, less change. And sometimes it's wise to do that, obviously. But sometimes you can look at the harder decision, and it will likely come with some short-term pain or challenges. But on the other side of that is ideally a whole bigger opportunity that you would have never had if you didn't go through the hard period.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the more courageous decision to make for your mission, right? For the long-term mission, and being able to zoom out and say, I don't want to, but if I have to take some shorter-term pain, and even if that could be a year, right? Or for News Story, it was almost 2 years where things were more challenging, more painful than I was used to, or we were used to, or honestly is even sustainable. But it was all in service of what's on the other side of that. Yeah. And is what's on the other side of that worth it enough to go for it? Yeah. And I think founders and executives, like, that's the big stuff. Yeah. That's the courageous stuff that you get to do and make those decisions.
Is there any like tips that you rely on, or disciplines, I guess I should say, that you rely on to kind of get off the hamster wheel, to remove yourself from the short to midterm? I mean, you always, that's important, like you've said. Yeah. But it sometimes can just dominate your, what you're thinking and where you're spending your time. And so any disciplines that you've learned over the last decade that has really helped you stay focused on the end goal, where you're trying to go?
Yeah, it's a good question. I also want to say, like, I don't recommend and don't advise for every year you're constantly thinking like, well, should I change? Should I evolve? Right? Yeah. It should flow more naturally, where you obviously don't want to be constantly like changing your strategy every year. Yeah. Right? That's not a recipe for success. I think that you do, over, a course of time or a period, you do learn a lot from maybe how you started, right? So you're gathering all these data points and these learnings, and you're getting insights into, what would it take to make this, whether maybe 100 times, I don't even want to use the word bigger, but I'll start with that, 100 times bigger, or 100 times better, or higher quality,
Yeah.
right? And then you can start to imagine what it would actually look like to do that. And I think that's when, you could get ideas about how to evolve your strategy. But there's no like perfect calculus to how many times. It definitely shouldn't be like every year, because that's exhausting and it's too spread out.
Yeah.
I also think that you need to pop your head up and zoom out, I don't know how many, every couple years or whatever, and just say like, am I on this path, the strategy path that is going to give us the best chance to get to this end outcome that we've set, or end goal. And
Absolutely.
so for me, one of the things that I did last year is a News Story was coming off of more of a down year if you were just to measure some of the annual metrics.
Yeah.
Then we did have year over year growth, and then we had a down year, and I was pretty upset about that. It was our first year that I felt like missed the mark. We didn't do what we said we were going to do. And I did this exercise where I didn't, instead of just looking at those 12 months and, judging how I feel based off of those outcomes, I drew almost a 16-year chart, and I said, I want to look at the first 6 years of building News Story, and then this year I just went through was a dip, and I think the next year might even be flat or a dip. But what we're building during that dip, because of the big idea that we have to evolve, on the other side of it is going to be so much more growth that it's worth it. And then I basically looked at it almost as like a stock chart that would tell a story of, this was our path if we didn't make this strategy change. And it, it's a nice path. It's good. And then this is the path that looks like making this change. What came with short-term dips, but then on the other side, it was so much more than if we didn't make that decision.
Yeah. Something you said, I think it was the first day, and I'm putting together maybe that this like period, this dip period was also a pivotal change for News Story, in that you said something along the lines of like, it'd be irresponsible not to try this. Mm-hmm. Can you expand upon like what you meant by that? And was that something that you'd realized going into the dip, while you're in the dip, or it's what's helping you come out of the dip?
Yeah, I think that's a framework. I'll tell the quick story. That is a really important question for founders, executives, and their boards to think about. And when you have a big decision to make, right? That could be, should we invest into this program or R&D project that there's a lot of risk to it, right? But what's the upside, right? And then you kind of make the calculation like, okay, if it works, right, given the amount we're investing, which probably don't want to bet the whole company on it, right? but like what amount that we're investing from our budget is enough to say, if this works for our mission, for the people we serve, it's actually irresponsible for us not to try it because of the upside. And you have to be willing to have that trade-off of, well, it might not work, and why would I spend money on this thing that I know is not going to work if I can just go serve people that with my current program that I know already works?
Yeah.
Right? And the answer would be because you're trying to get more lift or more reach in a way that's the only way you can do that is by trying something new. And so, it'd be, is this irresponsible not to try?
Yeah.
And that's like a judgment question. And then when News Story decided to evolve a lot of our program model and funding model and business model, the question that I asked myself and our board was, we could keep doing what we're doing, but we really believe this is a path that would impact more people for our mission. Is it irresponsible for us not to try this? And not for keeping the organization safe, not for all these other optics, but for the actual people we are trying to serve and work with for the mission. Is this irresponsible not to try for them?
Yeah. And it sounds like you really leaned into that, and you're doubling down and going for that upside shot.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun to watch your guys' progress over the next several years.
Thank you.
As you guys go for it. Another thing that I feel like came up a lot, both from stage and just in conversations, was this like idea of burnout, just founder burnout, entrepreneurial burnout. What do you do to stay ambitious, especially over the last 8, 9, actually year 10, going on year 10 at News Story? How do you stay ambitious? How do you stay in the game?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of the, I think, more routine. I don't want to call it basic, but like the more routine, basic habits that are important for me, and it's just try my best not to overwork, to delegate, to just try to choose a few of the big main things that only I can work on. So I think from just like a time and management standpoint, that helps, of just being smart about not being too, everybody has their own limit. So I don't want to say certain hours. I love working hard, but obviously at the same time, you have to be wise about it.
Yeah.
Being smart about sleep, fitness, all that stuff, diet. I really do think as a founder, that stuff matters, because ultimately it's going to give you energy. It's going to do all these things where you need energy and you need consistent habits that are going to, like an athlete, that are going to help you go forward. And if you ignore all that stuff, you kind of ignore it at your own peril. Right. So those are some of the more basic things that are just being intentional. The other things that I think are probably more important are surrounding myself with other peers and founders, doing stuff like this where we can talk about real challenges. We can talk about certain issues that we may see years out and try to come up with solutions. So if compensation and pay in the current nonprofit structure is maybe going to be a problem long term, like how do we think about that? So being around other high quality people that you can be real and vulnerable with too has been super helpful. And then, for me, the last one has been making sure that our strategy, like what we're doing, how we're doing, is exciting and stimulating to me and like very interesting. That's probably a more selfish answer, but like it should be something. And this is when we evolved our model that I'm like very intellectually curious about. I'm very motivated by. I want to learn more. I want to like see us grow in a certain area, and I think that's life-giving because it's a genuine interest that
Totally.
I can't shake.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I think last thing would just be trying to have a more clear, I want to call it an end game, but like bigger picture path to making revenue even more sustainable, but like a path that doesn't feel like it's a constant slog. But this like, and that could be with your team, that could be with your model, that could be with so many examples, monthly recurring giving. I mean, there's so many examples, but like if you currently feel burned out with your existing fundraising model, you either got to change the model or I don't know, maybe you are actually too burned out from it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, you've been talking a lot this week, and so we got to give you some rest.
Okay.
So I've got two more questions,
All right,
and it's
cool.
going to be some shameless plugging here for
Go for it.
Funraise.
Love it.
We've been following News Story for a long time.
Yeah.
And before News Story started working with Funraise, you guys had built your own technology to manage your fundraising. What was the reason for shifting from in-house building your own tech to manage gift processing and so forth to going with someone like Funraise?
Yeah, I mean, we had multiple software engineers on our team, and I don't know if we thought that we could just build stuff better, but there was just a mentality of like, we want to customize it, we want to have it more in-house, and we did that for years, and
it worked. You guys raised tons of money.
I mean, it worked, but like, it ultimately was a calculation of like, is this actually worth it for all the money we're spending?
Yeah.
Right. The time that it's not just money. It's also like really smart people's minds and time, bandwidth. Right.
Yeah.
And the calculation ended up being like, if we could just partner with a really, really great platform that has a trusted, awesome product, I think that's the key, right?
Yep.
It's like, if it's not a great product, then you're not going to want to, you're going to be way, way, way more resistant to actually doing it. But I think some of my staff and, we were able to demo the product, test it out, feel it out, and just got to the point where it's like, this is almost like, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Is to partner with somebody that this is all they think about. This is their business. This is their product. They're constantly making it better. They're constantly improving and refreshing it, and we get to be recipients of their product.
Yeah.
So it's a great decision. I highly recommend it.
We're a year in.
Yeah.
Like I think the February is a year into the partnership. And how is Funraise delivered for you and the team?
Our team loves it.
Awesome.
Absolutely. So 10 out of 10 recommend. And I know you and I were talking the other day on the hike about some of your product vision of some new things that may be coming for Funraise, and that's also very exciting to know that y'all are a company that isn't just settling with the current product, even though the current product's great and I highly recommend for what it's doing, but you're also thinking through, how do we create more value for our customers?
Yeah.
And in ways that you and I were talking about, where we feel those pains that you're talking about in other areas of the organization from a forecasting perspective, and some of those things that we could try to do it all ourselves. We could hire more people to do it all ourselves, but why would we do that if we could have a trusted, software platform that can do it for us?
Yeah, I mean, you've got a $30 trillion problem to solve yourself. So why focus on the software? One of the things the speaker said today, the Instacart story about how there was several companies before Instacart that just had failed, and then it was like the right time. Same with like Uber. Like Uber wouldn't have worked if people didn't have a smartphone in their hand.
100%.
And what I'm excited about where Funraise is going next is really because of where technology has come.
Totally.
Started Funraise 8 years ago, and where
That's
technology
good.
is at today, specifically around AI and what we can do with that to help strengthen an organization's ability to fundraise and to have more insightful intelligence about their donors and what's happening at the ground level. It gives me a lot of energy for the future, because technology is progressing in such a way that's just going to make us be able to innovate at a faster clip and provide better and more value for the nonprofit community.
Yeah.
So, Brett, thank you so much for letting us be a part of Camp
Yeah.
Redwood.
Honor to have y'all.
Look
Been
forward
an amazing partner.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.